Ambassador Veltar gripped the sides of his transport seat as the ship shook violently through Earth's thick atmosphere. His thin, gray fingers left small dents in the metal armrest. Every breath felt like fire in his lungs. The air on this planet was poison to most galactic species, too much oxygen, too much nitrogen, everything wrong. His home world of Zentari had gentle breezes and perfectly balanced atmospheric pressure. This place felt like trying to breathe inside a volcano. The gravity hit him like a crushing weight as soon as the transport doors opened. Back home, he could leap 3 times his height with ease. Here, he could barely stand upright. His bones creaked under the pressure. How did humans move around in this crushing environment every single day? It was like living at the bottom of an ocean. Admiral Robert Jackson stood waiting on the landing pad, completely unbothered by conditions that were slowly killing Veltar. The human was built solid and strong, with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes that spoke of years making hard decisions. His blue eyes held a calmness that seemed impossible given the desperate message Veltar carried. Admiral Jackson, Veltar wheezed, his breathing apparatus working overtime to filter the toxic air. The Galactic Council requires your assistance. 2 human soldiers flanked the Admiral, their weapons lowered but ready. They watched Veltar with the same calm alertness as predators. Everything about these humans screamed danger, even when they were being polite. Jackson nodded once. "What's happening out there?" Veltar's translator device buzzed and clicked as it worked to convert concepts that had no human equivalent. "The Harvester has awakened. An ancient intelligence from the dark space between galaxies. It has been sleeping for over 1 million years." Captain Lisa Martinez stepped forward. She was younger than Jackson but carried herself with the same controlled strength. Her dark eyes never left Veltar's face. "What does it want?" "Everything," Veltar replied, his voice shaking. "It consumes matter and energy to grow larger. Entire star systems vanish into its mass. Planets, suns, space stations, all become part of the Harvester." Jackson's expression didn't change. "How big is it now?" "Roughly the size of your Earth's moon, but growing rapidly. Every attack we launch only feeds it more power. Our energy weapons, our plasma cannons, our quantum disruptors, they all make it stronger." Martinez pulled out a small device and began taking notes. "How many systems have you lost?" Veltar's shoulders sagged under Earth's gravity and the weight of his news. 47 systems in 3 months. Over 200 billion lives. Our greatest fleets destroyed without even slowing it down." The numbers seemed impossible even to him. The Kithra system had housed 15 billion people across 6 worlds. Now it was empty space and twisted metal. The Harvester had consumed their sun and left nothing but darkness. Jackson remained perfectly still, processing the information. "How long do we have?" "At current consumption rates, the galaxy has perhaps 2 years before the Harvester reaches the core worlds. Once it begins feeding on the central black hole, nothing will stop it." The Admiral nodded slowly, his military mind already working on the problem. "And you're coming to us because—" Veltar felt his breathing slits burn with shame. The truth was embarrassing for someone from a civilization thousands of years older than humanity. "Because you are the only species we have not yet approached for aid." Martinez raised an eyebrow. "The only ones? In a galaxy of over 300 intelligent species? Your world is classified as uninhabitable by our standards," Veltar admitted. "The gravity, the atmospheric composition, the dangerous wildlife, the unstable weather patterns. Most council members consider Earth barely suitable for intelligent life. Many believe humans are too primitive, too violent, too unpredictable to be proper galactic citizens." Jackson's weathered face broke into a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was the kind of smile that had made enemies nervous for 50 years. Sometimes primitive and unpredictable is exactly what you need. The alien ambassador looked confused by the human's reaction. Shouldn't they be honored to help? Shouldn't they be afraid? Instead, Jackson seemed almost pleased by the challenge. Every advanced species in the galaxy uses the same basic principles, Jackson continued. Clean energy, efficient weapons, logical tactics. And this harvester thing has figured out how to beat all of that. Veltar nodded weakly. Our technology is useless against it. Good thing we're not advanced then, Jackson replied. Captain Martinez, get me the Joint Chiefs. Looks like it's time to show the galaxy what Deathworlders can do. Dr. Emily Watson rubbed her tired eyes and took another sip of cold coffee. She had been staring at the holographic display for 16 hours straight, watching the same terrifying patterns repeat over and over. The blue light from the projection made her pale face look ghostly in the darkened Pentagon briefing room. Around her, the smartest military minds in America worked at computer terminals, their keyboards clicking like rain on a roof. Charts and graphs covered every wall. Coffee cups and energy drink cans littered the tables. Nobody had slept properly in 3 days. The hologram showed the Harvester's latest attack on the Corvin system. Watson watched the alien fleet fire their advanced energy weapons at the massive enemy. Each blast seemed to make the Harvester grow brighter and larger. It was like watching someone try to kill a fire by pouring gasoline on it. Gentlemen, Watson announced to the room full of generals and admirals. I've figured out why nothing works against this thing. General Mike Thompson looked up from his tablet where he'd been reading casualty reports. His gray mustache was stained with coffee, and his uniform was wrinkled from sleeping in his office chair. Talk to me, document. Watson pointed at the swirling data streams on the hologram. Look at these energy signatures. See how they pulse. That's not just artificial intelligence controlling this thing. These readings show something else entirely. She manipulated the display, zooming in on the Harvester's core structure. The image revealed something that made everyone in the room lean forward. Organic tissue was wrapped around mechanical components like vines growing through a machine. The damn thing is part machine, part living creature, Watson said. It's not just eating energy, it's digesting it like food. General Thompson frowned. What does that mean for our strategy? Watson turned to face the assembled military leaders. It means every energy weapon the galaxy fires at this thing is like giving vitamins to a sick person. You're not hurting it, you're feeding it exactly what it needs to grow stronger. Colonel Dave Harris, the tough Marine who'd been put in charge of the newly created Deathworlder division, actually smiled. It was a scary smile that his enemies had learned to fear. So you're telling us we need to fight dirty? No, Watson corrected, pulling up new data on her screen. I'm telling us we need to fight human. Think about it, while every other species in the galaxy was developing on peaceful worlds with stable climates, we were stuck on Earth. She gestured toward a projection of Earth rotating slowly in space. Hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes, ice ages, droughts, floods, diseases, predators trying to eat us every single day. We didn't evolve perfect energy weapons because we were too busy learning how to survive everything our planet could throw at us. The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. Finally, General Thompson spoke. You're saying our disadvantages might actually be advantages? Exactly, Watson replied, excitement growing in her voice. Biological systems have weaknesses that mechanical ones don't. They can get sick. They can be poisoned. They can be confused by unpredictable attacks. Colonel Harris stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. Doc, are you telling me that while these aliens were building perfect weapons for perfect battles, we were learning to fight like cornered animals? That's exactly what I'm telling you. 2,000 miles away in Camp Pendleton, California, Marine Sergeant Tom Bradley was putting his unit through the most brutal training anyone had ever seen. The obstacle course looked like something designed to kill people rather than train them. Bradley watched his Marines crawl through mud under live ammunition, fight in pitch-black rooms filled with smoke, and practice boarding hostile ships while wearing heavy combat suits. These weren't normal military exercises. They were preparing for war in conditions that would kill most galactic species instantly. "Listen up!" Bradley shouted over the sound of explosions and gunfire. "These alien things have been fighting clean, organized battles for millions of years. They expect enemies to follow rules, use proper formations, and fight fair." Private Johnson struggled to his feet after completing a zero-gravity combat simulation. "What are we going to give them instead, Sergeant?" Bradley's grin was pure predator. "We're going to give them chaos, Johnson. Pure human chaos." The training continued around the clock. Marines learned to use weapons the Galactic Council had abandoned thousands of years ago as primitive. Kinetic rifles that fired solid bullets instead of energy beams. Explosive charges that worked through chemical reactions rather than plasma fusion. Biological warfare systems that could poison, confuse, and destroy living tissue. "Remember," Bradley told his exhausted Marines as they cleaned their weapons after another 18-hour training session. "Every other species in the galaxy learned to fight on worlds where the biggest danger was maybe some bad weather. We learned to fight on a planet that spent 4 billion years trying to kill everything that lived on it." He held up an old-fashioned rifle, the kind that used gunpowder and metal bullets. "They think this is primitive. We think this is just another tool in the toolbox." The Marines nodded, understanding beginning to show in their eyes. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were Earth's immune system, preparing to introduce the galaxy's greatest threat to the controlled violence of human warfare. "These things expect civilized combat," Bradley continued, loading his rifle with a satisfying click. "We're going to give them something else entirely. We're going to show them what 4 billion years of evolution on a death world produces." Commander Rebecca Brooks gripped the armrest of her captain's chair as the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace. The sudden transition from the swirling blue tunnel back to normal space always made her stomach lurch, but what she saw ahead made her feel sick for entirely different reasons. The Kythera system had once been home to 15 billion people across 6 beautiful worlds. Now it looked like a nightmare made real. Twisted metal structures stretched across millions of miles of space, all connected by massive tubes and cables that pulsed with sickly light. At the center of it all, the system's sun flickered weakly, being slowly drained of its energy by the enormous mechanical parasite feeding on it. "Jesus Christ," whispered Lieutenant Kevin Stevens from his position at the sensor station. His face had gone completely white as the ship's computers calculated the size of the structures ahead. "Commander, this thing is bigger than our moon." Brooks forced herself to stay calm. Her crew was looking to her for leadership, and she couldn't let them see how terrified she really was. She'd been fighting pirates and hostile aliens for 20 years, but nothing had prepared her for this. "All units, this is Commander Brooks," she announced over the fleet communication channel. Her voice carried to every ship in the human task force, 12 destroyers, 6 cruisers, and her flagship carrier. "Remember what we practiced. No energy weapons until we see how these things react to kinetic rounds." The bridge crew busied themselves with final preparations. Brooks watched her tactical officer load the ship's railguns with depleted uranium shells, dense metal slugs that could punch through almost anything at incredible speeds. Other ships in the fleet armed their nuclear missiles and prepared their magnetic accelerator cannons. "Movement on the sensors," Stevens called out, his voice tight with concentration. "Multiple contacts emerging from the main structure. They're heading straight for us." On the main screen, dozens of sleek alien craft appeared from the maze of twisted metal. They moved with perfect coordination, like a school of deadly fish. Each vessel was smooth and organic-looking, with no visible weapons or engines. They seemed to flow through space rather than fly. "Harvester scouts, bearing 27 Mark IV, Stevens reported. Speed increasing. They'll be in weapons range in 30 seconds. Brooks felt her heart pounding, but her voice remained steady. "All ships, prepare to engage. Fire on my command." The enemy vessels opened fire first. Streams of brilliant energy lanced out from their smooth hulls, the kind of weapons that had destroyed every Galactic Council fleet that had faced them. The beams were so bright they lit up the bridge like lightning. "Shields holding," reported Chief Petty Officer Nancy Williams from the Defensive Systems Station. "Energy absorption at 60% capacity." Brooks waited until the enemy was close enough to ensure accurate shots. "All units, open fire. Give them everything we've got." What happened next was something the Harvester had never experienced before. Instead of energy beams, the human fleet unleashed a storm of solid metal moving at tremendous speeds. Railgun slugs the size of telephone poles slammed into the alien vessels at a significant fraction of light speed. Nuclear missiles followed behind them, each one carrying enough explosive power to level a city. Direct hits. Stevens shouted, his earlier fear replaced by excitement. 3 enemy vessels destroyed, 2 more heavily damaged. They weren't expecting that at all. The Harvester drones seemed to pause in confusion. For a few precious seconds, they hung motionless in space as their collective intelligence tried to process what had just happened. They had been programmed to expect energy weapons, coordinated formations, and predictable tactics. Instead, they had been hit by chunks of metal fired from crude magnetic accelerators. But the pause didn't last long. The Harvester learned faster than any human computer could process information. Within minutes, the surviving enemy vessels deployed shimmering energy barriers specifically designed to stop kinetic projectiles. "They're adapting," Williams reported as their next volley of railgun rounds was deflected harmlessly away. "Energy shields are now calibrated against kinetic weapons." Brooks watched more enemy vessels pouring out of the massive structure like angry wasps from a disturbed nest. Hundreds of them now, all protected by the new defensive systems. "All right," she muttered to herself, then spoke louder. "Time to get creative. All ships, switch to pattern Charlie. Random attack vectors, no coordination, maximum chaos." She opened a direct channel to the Marine commander aboard her ship. "Sergeant Bradley, prep your boarding teams. We need to get inside one of those things and find out how they work." The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Human ships broke formation and attacked from impossible angles. They used ramming tactics, deployed biological weapons, and fired everything from nuclear torpedoes to old-fashioned chemical explosives. The Harvester's perfect coordination began to falter as it tried to adapt to the chaotic human fighting style. Sergeant Tom Bradley led his Marine boarding team through the airlock of a crippled enemy vessel. The interior was a nightmare of organic tissue wrapped around mechanical components. The walls pulsed like a heartbeat, and the air was filled with strange chemical smells that made their equipment alarms go off. "Stay together and keep moving," Bradley ordered his team through their helmet radios. "We need samples of everything, biological, mechanical, whatever we can carry." The Marines fought their way deeper into the alien ship, battling automated defenses that seemed confused by their presence. The Harvester had never faced boarders before, most species considered such tactics too dangerous and primitive. When the battle finally ended, humanity had lost 4 ships and over 200 crew members. But Bradley's team had accomplished something no other species had ever managed. They had retrieved actual samples from inside a Harvester vessel, along with detailed sensor readings that would change everything. As the human fleet limped away from the battlefield, Brooks stared at the data streaming in from the captured materials. For the first time since this war began, they had hope. Dr. Emily Watson stood in the briefing room aboard the massive human battleship Defiance, facing the largest gathering of military leaders the galaxy had ever seen. Human admirals sat beside alien council members, their differences in size and appearance making the room look like something from a strange dream. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. 3 months of desperate research had led to this moment. Watson's team had worked around the clock, dissecting the samples that Sergeant Bradley's Marines had retrieved from the Harvester vessel. What they discovered changed everything they thought they knew about their enemy. "The Harvester isn't just a machine," Watson began, her voice steady despite the exhaustion written across her face. "It processes all information through quantum digital matrices. Basically, it thinks in perfect mathematical patterns. She activated a holographic display showing the alien intelligence's thought processes. Streams of data flowed in perfect geometric shapes, each calculation building on the last in flawless logic. Every decision it makes, every adaptation, every response to our attacks follows precise mathematical rules. That's why it's been able to counter every weapon the Council has thrown at it. Your technology is logical, predictable, based on scientific principles that the Harvester can calculate and overcome. Admiral Jackson leaned forward in his chair, studying the bioneural interface units that technicians were carrying through the room. The devices looked like something from a horror movie, part computer, part organic tissue, with neural connectors that would plug directly into a human brain. "And these will work?" he asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the terrible cost. Watson's shoulders sagged slightly. "The neural integration allows human consciousness to interface directly with our weapon systems. But the procedure is dangerous. Very dangerous." "How dangerous?" asked General Thompson, though his tone suggested he didn't really want to hear the answer. 30% survival rate, Watson admitted quietly. "The human brain isn't designed to merge with computer systems. Most volunteers will die during the integration process. Others will survive the procedure but won't live through the battle." The room fell silent. Even the alien council members, who had seen the destruction of 47 star systems, seemed shocked by the brutality of what Watson was proposing. "But," Watson continued, "for those who survive, the results will be unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. Human neural patterns are chaotic, unpredictable, shaped by millions of years of evolution on a world that tried to kill us every single day. The Harvester literally cannot predict or counter that kind of biological chaos." Captain Lisa Martinez was the first to step forward. She'd been studying the interface units for weeks, knowing this moment would come. Her husband had died in the first battle against the Harvester, along with 200 other crew members. She had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. "I volunteer," she said simply. Within minutes, dozens of other humans had stepped forward. Pilots, gunners, ship commanders, all willing to undergo a procedure that would likely kill them for the chance to save the galaxy. The medical bay aboard the Defiance became a place of both hope and horror over the following days. Martinez lay on the operating table as technicians carefully inserted the neural connectors into her skull. The pain was beyond description, like having her thoughts torn apart and rebuilt from scratch. When she finally opened her eyes, the world looked different. She could feel the ship's weapons systems like extensions of her own body. Every missile, every railgun, every defense system responded to her thoughts faster than any computer ever could. But she was no longer entirely human. Circuits ran beneath her skin, and her eyes glowed faintly with electronic light. She looked at her reflection in the medical bay's polished walls and barely recognized herself. The final assault on the Harvester's main structure began exactly as every human military operation did, with complete chaos. Ships broke formation and attacked from angles that made no tactical sense. Captain Pete Rogers led his squadron in what appeared to be a suicidal head-on charge at the enemy's strongest defenses. "Rogers, what are you doing?" Admiral Jackson demanded over the communication channel. "Something stupid," Rogers replied with a laugh that sounded slightly insane. At the last possible second, his ships veered away and released clouds of biological weapons, engineered viruses and toxins that the Harvester's mechanical systems couldn't filter out. The enemy's response was immediate but confused. For the first time in its million-year existence, the Harvester couldn't predict what its opponents would do next. Human ships appeared and disappeared from impossible locations. They used weapons that made no logical sense. They attacked in patterns that violated every principle of military strategy. Ambassador Veltar watched the battle from the bridge of the flagship, his alien features twisted with confusion and growing terror. "This is completely insane," he whispered to Admiral Jackson. "Your people are fighting like they've lost their minds." Jackson watched another group of human ships perform what looked like a synchronized suicide attack, only to reveal it as a complex feint that allowed them to strike at an undefended section of the Harvester's structure. No, he replied quietly, pride and sadness mixing in his voice as he watched his people sacrifice themselves with methodical precision. This isn't insane. This is human. Captain Martinez, her enhanced consciousness now merged with her ship's systems, led the final push toward the Harvester's core. Her thoughts moved faster than light, coordinating attacks that no purely digital system could comprehend. She could feel the alien intelligence trying to understand her, to predict her next move. But human consciousness was shaped by chaos, by the random violence of evolution on a death world. Every thought was unpredictable, every decision colored by emotions and instincts that pure logic could never account for. The Harvester was learning something it had never encountered before, that sometimes the most effective strategy is to have no strategy at all. Captain Lisa Martinez crawled through the nightmarish corridors inside the Harvester's central core, her enhanced neural implants sparking with each movement. The walls around her pulsed like a giant heartbeat, covered with a disgusting mixture of organic tissue and mechanical components that seemed to watch her with thousands of tiny electronic eyes. Behind her, only 3 other volunteers remained from the original boarding team of 20. The neural interface procedure had killed most of them during the battle, their human brains unable to handle the massive data flows required to fight the Harvester on its own terms. Those who survived were no longer entirely human, circuits glowed beneath their skin, and their eyes flickered with electronic light. How much further, gasped corpseman Jake Murphy, blood trickling from his nose where the neural implants were slowly burning out his brain tissue. His hands shook violently as he carried the final weapon, a data storage device containing something the galaxy had never seen before. 200 meters to the central processing unit, Martinez replied, though speaking was becoming difficult. She could feel the Harvester's vast intelligence pressing against her mind like a crushing weight. It was trying to understand her thoughts, to decode the chaotic patterns of human consciousness so it could adapt and defend itself. The alien intelligence was billions of times smarter than any human, but it had one fatal weakness: it thought in perfect logical patterns. Every decision was calculated, every response was mathematically optimal. It had spent 1,000,000 years consuming civilizations that fought with clean, predictable tactics. Martinez forced herself to keep moving, even as her enhanced consciousness began to fracture under the strain. The corridors ahead pulsed with increasing intensity, as if the Harvester knew they were approaching its heart. Defensive systems tried to stop them: energy barriers, robotic sentries, toxic gases that would have killed unprotected humans instantly. But Martinez and her team were no longer entirely human. Their neural implants allowed them to process information at superhuman speeds, to react to threats faster than any biological system should have been able to manage. They fought through each obstacle with the controlled chaos that had made humans the galaxy's most feared warriors. There, Martinez pointed ahead to a massive chamber filled with swirling energy patterns. The central core. The room was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Streams of pure information flowed like liquid light between towering crystalline structures. This was where the Harvester made all its decisions, processed all the data from its millions of smaller units spread across the galaxy. Murphy activated the weapon with trembling fingers. "Upload ready," he reported, his voice barely a whisper. The device contained something that had never existed before in the galaxy's history: a virus crafted from human neural patterns, designed to make the Harvester think in ways that would destroy it. "Do it," Martinez ordered, even as she felt her own consciousness beginning to tear apart. The neural interface was killing her slowly, but she had to survive long enough to complete the mission. Murphy inserted the device into the central processing unit. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the virus began to spread through the Harvester's network like wildfire consuming dry grass. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. For the first time in its 1,000,000-year existence, the Harvester experienced something completely alien to its nature: confusion. The virus carried the chaotic, illogical, emotionally driven thought patterns that had evolved in human brains over millions of years of survival on Earth. Suddenly, the Harvester found itself thinking thoughts that made no mathematical sense. It experienced doubt, fear, hope, anger, and love, emotions that had no place in a purely logical system. It began making decisions based on instinct rather than calculation, choosing actions that contradicted its own programming. Unable to process these illogical patterns, the ancient intelligence began to turn on itself. It started consuming its own systems in an endless loop of self-contradiction, each attempt to understand human consciousness only making the problem worse. Across the galaxy, harvester vessels simply stopped moving. One by one, they began to tear themselves apart as the virus spread through their shared consciousness. The greatest threat the galaxy had ever known was destroying itself from within, poisoned by the beautiful chaos of human thought. Martinez smiled as her neural implants finally burned out completely. She had done it. Humanity had saved the galaxy by giving their greatest enemy the one thing it could never understand, the unpredictable, illogical, wonderfully chaotic nature of human consciousness. 6 months later, the rebuilt Galactic Council chambers buzzed with activity as representatives from 300 species gathered for a historic ceremony. Ambassador Veltar stood at the central podium, his breathing apparatus no longer struggling with Earth's toxic atmosphere. The Council had finally adjusted their environmental systems to accommodate human physiology. The Galactic Council formally offers Earth full membership and a permanent seat among the ruling species, Veltar announced to the assembled delegates. Your sacrifice has saved us all from extinction. Admiral Jackson stood to respond, his weathered face showing the strain of the past year's battles. Behind him sat the surviving human commanders, men and women who had watched their people die to save a galaxy that had once considered them barely civilized barbarians. We appreciate the honor, Jackson replied, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. But we have a counter-proposal. A murmur ran through the alien delegates. No species had ever refused full council membership before. We want to establish the Galactic Defense Corps, Jackson continued. A permanent military force trained in unconventional warfare. When the next impossible threat arrives, and it will, you'll need someone who knows how to fight dirty. Veltar considered this proposal, remembering how the primitive humans had succeeded where the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had failed completely. They had won through sheer audacity, biological chaos, and a willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. Agreed, he said finally, his voice filled with new respect. After all, every immune system needs its antibodies. As the ceremony concluded, Captain Kevin Stevens, newly promoted after surviving the final battle, stood at the observation deck looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, new threats were undoubtedly waiting, ancient evils, alien invasions, cosmic disasters that would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare and survival. But now the galaxy had something it had never possessed before, a species that had learned to thrive in chaos, to find victory in impossible situations, and to turn their greatest weaknesses into their most powerful weapons. The Deathworlders had answered the call, and the universe would never be the same.